Appalachia contains some of the most biodiverse temperate forests on Earth, the Appalachian Trail, and the most visited national park in America, the Great Smoky Mountains. And yet most of Appalachia's 420 counties experience only modest tourism, struggling to convert natural beauty into sustained visitor economies. In September 2024, a single storm erased what tourism the region had built in a matter of days. This is the story of a region that has the scenery to be a destination, but keeps failing to become one. Rail lines snaking into the Blue Ridge changed everything for Western North Carolina. In 1882, the Western North Carolina Railroad connected Asheville to the national network, turning what had been an isolated mountain town into a destination for wealthy travelers from the east. The journey that once took days by wagon could now be made in a matter of hours. Real estate speculators and hoteliers circulated glossy pamphlets touting the region's healthful air and panoramic views, setting the stage for a new era of ambition. No one embodied that ambition more than George Washington Vanderbilt II. In 1889, Vanderbilt began acquiring land in the French Broad River Valley, eventually amassing 125,000 acres. His vision was not simply a private escape, but a permanent resort, a self-contained community of health, recreation, and culture that could rival the great spas of Europe. Building Biltmore was a feat of engineering and capital. The estate's construction cost more than $5 million, equivalent to over $150 million today. Vanderbilt commissioned Frederick Law Olmsted to design the grounds, adding gardens, a model dairy, and miles of carriage roads. He even funded a private rail spur to bring in guests and supplies. Biltmore was more than a mansion. It was a statement that the mountains could host a world-class leisure economy. Vanderbilt's correspondence reveals a deliberate push to attract the nation's elite, framing Asheville as a mountain paradise rather than a backwater. For a brief period, the region's future seemed wide open, proof that with access and investment, Appalachia could compete with the most fashionable destinations in America. By the turn of the 20th century, boosters across Western North Carolina launched a campaign to rebrand the mountains as the land of the sky. This phrase, borrowed from an 1873 novel, became the centerpiece of a marketing push that aimed to lure city dwellers with promises of pure air, sweeping vistas, and genteel resort life. Postcards, pamphlets, and newspaper ads painted the region as an exclusive retreat, a place where visitors could escape the grime and chaos of industrial America. County tourism boards and hotel owners pooled resources to fund glossy promotional materials, hoping to attract the same affluent travelers who flocked to the Adirondacks or the White Mountains. Yet behind the poetic slogans, the promise of prosperity rested on shaky ground. The success of Asheville and a handful of gateway towns masked a deeper reality. Most mountain communities lacked the roads, rail connections, and capital needed to draw visitors in significant numbers. Even as the region's image shifted from backwater to scenic haven, the benefits flowed unevenly. Towns with access to new highways or the means to build grand hotels saw a surge in visitor spending, while isolated valleys remained cut off, their economies unchanged. Efforts to coordinate a truly regional tourism strategy faltered. Infrastructure projects stalled or bypassed poorer counties, and booster campaigns rarely translated into lasting investment beyond a narrow corridor. The Land of the Sky brand succeeded in reshaping perceptions for a select audience, but it never became the engine of broad-based development that its architects imagined. The gap between image and reality would persist, setting the stage for deeper vulnerabilities in the decades ahead. Steep ridges and winding hollows define much of Appalachia, but these aren't just features on a map. They are obstacles that shape every aspect of economic life. The region's sharp topography raises the cost of building and maintaining roads, bridges, and rail lines. While a mile of highway might cost $2 million in flat country, that figure more than triples in mountain terrain, averaging $6.5 million per lane mile. The result is a patchwork of narrow, twisting roads and a persistent lack of direct interstate access for nearly a third of Appalachian counties. Air travel offers little relief. 62% of counties are more than 90 minutes from the nearest major airport. Logistics for tourism become a daily challenge. Buses struggle on switchbacks, and delivery trucks face delays after every storm or rockslide. Even the most scenic towns are often hours from the main arteries of commerce. The Appalachian Regional Commission's 2021 report found that despite 2 million acres of protected land and a wealth of natural attractions, only 12% of counties have the planning capacity, financing, and trained workforce needed to turn those assets into consistent tourism revenue. Gateway towns with highway or rail connections can attract visitors and investment, but most communities remain isolated by geography and underinvestment. Access, not just beauty, sets the limits of tourism's promise in Appalachia. The region's landscape, celebrated in postcards, has quietly enforced the boundaries of economic opportunity for generations. Coal defined the economic reality of Appalachia for more than a century. From the late 1800s through the early 2000s, mining shaped land use, steered public spending, and controlled the region's political agenda. In counties across eastern Kentucky, the coal industry was not just the largest employer, it was often the only one that mattered. Local tax bases, school funding, and hospital construction all depended on the fortunes of the mines. Tourism, when it was discussed at all, had to compete for the same land, labor, and investment that coal demanded. Projects that might have boosted visitor numbers, scenic byways, hiking trails, even historic site preservation, were routinely sidelined or delayed if they threatened mining rights or haul road access. The numbers reveal the depth of this dependency. In 2007, coal supported more than 13,000 jobs in eastern Kentucky alone. By 2022, that figure had plummeted below 2,800. The collapse was swift and devastating, erasing nearly 80% of coal jobs in just 15 years. Population loss followed. Between 2010 and 2022, 8 eastern Kentucky counties lost a combined 45,000 residents. The service sector, including tourism, struggled to fill the vacuum. Unlike regions with a mix of industries, Appalachia's mono-economy left little infrastructure or workforce ready to pivot. Investment in hotels, restaurants, and outdoor recreation lagged far behind as capital and political attention had long been routed elsewhere. The result was a brittle economy, one that could not easily reinvent itself when the foundation crumbled. The legacy of coal's dominance continues to shape the limits of what tourism can deliver across much of the region. For decades, national headlines have painted Appalachia with the broad brush of hardship. Stories of poverty, isolation, and addiction have dominated coverage, creating an image that lingers in the public mind. The opioid crisis gave these narratives new fuel. Between 2015 and 2022, nearly two-thirds of Americans surveyed by the Appalachian Regional Commission associated the region first with drug abuse and economic struggle, not with mountain scenery or outdoor adventure. Tourism boards have struggled to counteract this stigma. Internal ARC reports from 2016 to 2018 found that only 8% of potential travelers in the Midwest and Northeast listed Appalachia as a top vacation choice. Even among those who recognize the region's name, more than half expressed concerns about safety and drug activity. The challenge goes beyond negative press. Appalachia competes for visitors against mountain destinations like the Rockies, where the brand is synonymous with adventure and luxury. In contrast, the Appalachian identity remains vague or invisible to many Americans. Marketing campaigns such as Adventure Appalachia and Pure and Simple were drafted but never fully launched, stalled by budget cuts and political disagreements. As a result, the region's natural beauty is often overshadowed by a reputation it cannot shake. For many potential travelers, the idea of visiting Appalachia is shaped less by its forests and trails than by a steady drip of stories about decline. This cultural ceiling imposed from outside limits the region's ability to build a reliable visitor economy, no matter how dramatic the scenery or how urgent the need for economic revival. Hurricane Helene struck western North Carolina on September 27, 2024, unleashing rainfall that overwhelmed the region's natural and built defenses. In just a few hours, the French Broad River surged past the 1916 flood record, cresting at 25.6 feet, more than 2 feet higher than the previous benchmark. Emergency call logs began before dawn as water poured into low-lying neighborhoods. By sunrise, Biltmore Village and the River Arts District were underwater, their streets transformed into swift, debris-choked channels. The scale of destruction was immediate and total. More than 125,000 housing units across western North Carolina were damaged or destroyed. The U.S. Geological Survey recorded nearly 2,000 landslides, many of them cutting off entire communities from outside help. Roads buckled or vanished beneath mud and water, leaving rescue crews to navigate a shifting maze of blockages. The storm's human toll was severe. 108 confirmed deaths in North Carolina, including 43 in Buncombe County alone. For many, the danger came not from wind, but from the sudden rise of water in places long thought safe. Asheville, the region's tourism engine, became a case study in vulnerability. Biltmore Village, once a showcase for upscale shopping and historic charm, saw its storefronts gutted by floodwater before dawn. The River Arts District, a hub for local artists and a magnet for visitors, lost entire studios and years of creative work in a matter of hours. Artisans like Mia Rogers, Javier Lopez, and Sasha Kim documented the loss in real time. Photos of submerged kilns, ruined commissions, and dye vats adrift in brown water. Insurance exclusions and denied claims added a second wave of hardship, revealing how unprepared the visitor economy was for a disaster of this magnitude. Beyond the city, nearly 2,000 landslides isolated rural towns, with road closures stretching for days. In places like Irwin, Tennessee and Clayton, Georgia, critical employers and tourism draws were knocked offline, compounding the sense of isolation. The disaster was not just a weather event, it was the exposure of every unaddressed weakness in the region's economic foundation. The same landscape that once promised prosperity now amplified the crisis, turning a storm into a regional catastrophe. Tourism authorities in Buncombe County moved quickly to recalculate the year's outlook. By early October, the numbers pointed to a collapse. Visitor activity was forecast to drop by 70% for the final quarter of 2024. The projected loss, $584 million, was not just a line on a balance sheet. It represented the sudden evaporation of a sector that, the year before, had generated $3 billion and accounted for a fifth of the county's entire economic output. Lodging data captured the speed of the downturn. October occupancy fell by 74% compared to the previous year, and November brought only modest improvement, with bookings still down 57%. Hotels and short-term rentals sat empty as travelers canceled plans en masse. The drop rippled outward. Restaurants, breweries, tour operators, and event venues all reported their worst quarter on record. The labor market absorbed the shock with brutal efficiency. Unemployment in Buncombe County jumped from 2.5% to 10.4% almost overnight. Thousands of hospitality and service jobs vanished, many of them held by workers with few alternatives. By March 2025, 6 months after the storm, Asheville's unemployment rate remained stuck at 6%, more than double its pre-disaster level and far above the state average. For a region long promoted as a tourism powerhouse, the blow revealed how much local livelihoods depended on the steady flow of visitors. Unlike smaller mountain towns, Buncombe's scale made the impact impossible to ignore. The county's visitor economy was not a side business, it was the backbone. When the system failed, the consequences spread to every corner of daily life, from tax revenues that funded public services to the survival of Main Street businesses. Recovery, it became clear, would require more than rebuilding storefronts. The collapse exposed a deeper fragility. Tourism in Appalachia could not shield itself from disaster when its foundations had never been truly secure. Federal disaster aid arrived on paper long before it reached the ground. Congress approved $9 billion in recovery funds after Hurricane Helene, but by the start of 2025, much of that money remained locked in bureaucratic limbo. In Buncombe County, some businesses managed to reopen, but entire communities like Craigtown and Garin Creek were erased from the map, their water systems and roads still in ruins. Local officials in western North Carolina held town hall meetings and issued public statements, demanding answers for why the promised funds had not materialized. State leaders pointed to stalled payments and compliance reviews at the Department of Housing and Urban Development, while internal congressional emails revealed months of partisan gridlock over how much of the aid would support tourism recovery versus basic infrastructure. The delays weren't just technical, they became ammunition in the 2024 election season, with lawmakers in Washington trading accusations over wasteful tourism spending and the fairness of the allocation formula. Meanwhile, the absence of clear timelines left residents and business owners in limbo. In the River Arts District, gallery owners debated whether to rebuild or relocate. In rural valleys, families faced indefinite boil water advisories and roads that washed out again with every heavy rain. The uncertainty bled into the region's reputation. Travel advisories lingered, and repeat visitors hesitated to book trips, wary of broken bridges and closed trails. Recovery for many became a waiting game, one shaped as much by policy friction as by the physical scars of the storm. The promise of federal help remained a distant headline, while the region's most vulnerable communities struggled to hold on. Hurricane Helene's destruction did not stop at county lines. Across western North Carolina, Tennessee, and Georgia, dozens of smaller mountain economies faced the same pattern. Flooded downtowns, landslides cutting off access, and vanished visitor traffic. In Irwin, Tennessee, a single manufacturing plant that doubled as a tourist draw was shuttered for weeks, while in Clayton, Georgia, the Tallulah River's floodwaters forced the closure of cabin rentals and damaged the historic covered bridge. For counties that depended on one or two attractions, the loss of even a single season's revenue was a blow few could absorb. The concentration of tourism in a handful of towns left much of the region exposed. ARC data from 2022 show that just 10 counties account for nearly half of all visitor spending in Appalachia. The remaining counties each capture less than 2%, leaving broad stretches of the mountains without the cushion of diversified visitor income. When Helene struck, the ripple effects extended far beyond the high-profile markets. Lodging bookings in Rabun County, Georgia, fell by 61%, while Unicoi County, Tennessee, reported a 38% decline in summer tourism revenue. The collapse was not isolated, it was systemic. The risk of repeat disaster now overshadows long-term planning. Scientific analyses from World Weather Attribution and NOAA confirm that warming sea temperatures have made storms like Helene 15 to 25% more likely to reach that intensity. State and federal tourism strategies now reference these findings, recommending higher bridge decks, stricter floodplain rules, and storm readiness certification for lodging. For local officials and business owners, the question is no longer if another Helene will come, but when, and whether the region's visitor economy can survive repeated exposure to climate extremes. Today, more than 70% of Appalachian counties face declining tourism revenues, while climate threats accelerate and infrastructure gaps widen. The crisis exposed by Hurricane Helene is not an anomaly, it's the predictable result of decades of deferred investment and persistent national neglect. As federal disaster funds stall and recovery falters, Appalachia's future as a destination is a test of whether the region remains an afterthought or finally demands a seat at the table.